Hi, welcome to the show. This is Caroline with Connected Caroline. Today, my guest is Kevin Flaherty, and he is the founder of a new music platform called The Van, which is allowing listeners to be able to help compensate independent artists in a fair and equitable way, which we all know is really not happening right now. Welcome to the show, Kevin. I can't wait to hear all about The Van. And, you can tell the audience all about your background in music and what that inspiration was to actually start The Van.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to talk to you today. I love the show, and and I love the opportunity to talk about something that I've been working on for a good long time to really try to make hopefully at least some incremental change to the music business. The numbers may not be something a lot of people are familiar with, but artists on average cannot make a living from streaming income. And of course, streaming income is predominantly what they have, especially in the last year and a half when they've been unable to tour. So there are a lot of stats out there, but suffice to say that the income that they earn from a stream on a major platform is fractions of a dollar, even fractions of a cent. And so what we're aiming to do is introduce a new model to the market that I think is missing, which hopefully finds some middle ground between that $0 that you don't have to pay on a streaming platform and that $25 or $30 or more that you might be asked to pay for merchandise, and to introduce a way for listeners with very little commitment to just compensate artists directly at a reasonable amount of money with no future commitment, and be assured that their money is going directly to the artist and that it's getting to them in a pretty equitable sum. So that's the impetus behind The Van. I can get into more detail on what we do, but I'm hoping to affect some change, and in the process to help educate artists and listeners that there are ways to consume music ethically, and it's really important to point to those platforms that are paying artists fairly, because they need to be able to make a living out of what they do.
In your research, are you finding that consumers, music lovers, really do want to have the opportunity to support their favorite artists, and there just wasn't anything out there that was providing that platform for them to connect with them in that way?
Yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, this artist, Spanish Love Songs, found themselves off the road, and KCRW interviewed them and said, "What are your fans telling you?" And they said they're asking us where they can support us directly and equitably, which I think is basically the distillation of what we're trying to do. And there was even a report that came out this week that suggested that as few as a few hundred independent artists worldwide might be able to make a living out of streaming revenue. I mean, that's sobering. So I think fans want to do the right thing. A lot of them, they don't necessarily know how bad it is for artists, and they don't necessarily know where they can do to make that kind of change. And over the last decade or so, we've seen a few platforms pop up that are artist run or that are operated by people who seem to care. And they have taken equity into mind in what they're building. But there are always a lot of businesses that are just looking to make money off of artists, and that's entirely different. So hopefully we're part of the former.
Yeah, I want to get into what fair and equitable really means, but let's just give a little background on you. You come from working at Capitol Records and EMI. Did you try to implement some of what you're doing with The Van in those, already obviously well-established massive studios and online platforms to no avail? Were they listening?
When I worked at EMI, which was forever ago now, it was even in the early enough that it predated iTunes. So a lot of what I was doing over there was really just kind of learning the ropes and doing catalog A&R, and I made compilations and box sets and all that, which was a lot of fun and educational. I went over to iTunes because I saw the writing on the wall for where at the time the music business was going, or had already gone. And I joined up over there about 2005, 2006, right before the iPhone launch. And no, I mean, candidly, I didn't even have this idea at that time. I was hired at iTunes to work in television and help build their transactional TV show business. which was an amazing opportunity in an entirely different industry that I didn't know very much about and ended up really, really loving. And I'm not going to malign Apple at all. I think Apple's doing a number of fantastic things. They're, of course, a huge company. They're restricted by the bottom line that they have to observe. I think any major company that has a toehold in music is ultimately trying to do a lot of things at once. It's just that when I started to wind down my run there, I realized that I wanted to do something where I could feel my contribution more directly. I wanted to work for myself, and I really wanted to work on behalf of artists because without singling out any one company, I think culturally, our attitude toward artists and their creative work is pretty woeful. We really have I wouldn't say never. I've only been alive for a fraction of history, but for much of the commercial music history, we really have not treated artists with a lot of respect. There have been a lot of people with their hands in their pockets, and it's certainly not gotten any better in the time that I've been working and the time that I've been a music fan, and it's gotten markedly worse. And of course, the pandemic just took away everything that hadn't already been taken away. Once they couldn't tour or sell the merch that they usually sell on the road, I don't know how many of them stayed alive, to be honest. They had no source of revenue. And so there was a lot of desperation out there. And there still is. So at any rate, the idea stemmed from really the desperation of seeing what they're up against and wanting to affect some kind of change. What we're doing is not going to cripple any of those major businesses. It's hopefully just going to add an alternative to the market that I think is needed, where when I talk about commitments, we're not another subscription service. You don't have to subscribe to anything. You don't have to give over personal information because we're not harvesting that. As a listener, you just can stream for free, which is a precedent that's been set already. When you like something that you hear, there's a support button at the top of that page. And with a couple clicks, you give that artist $1 or $5 or $10. But their net take on $1 is over 200 times what they get for a stream on a major platform. So you've already done them a solid, even just by contributing that much. And obviously, the more that you give them, the more that they can maybe, stay doing what they're doing, which is really the ultimate goal here. And by the way, for artists, we're also trying to do something that frees them up as well, where they don't have to go through a third party to manage their music. They can do it directly. We've made it very easy and with some very simple steps. We are educating them into how to reduce their fees elsewhere, including on PayPal, so that they can get more net from what they're doing. And we're asking them to partner with us on helping educate their listeners that they should think about finding their music from a platform that pays them fairly.
It's amazing. I want you to repeat that statistic of what they get.
It's hard to be specific because it varies from platform to platform and artist to artist, but the prevailing wisdom is that on Spotify, for instance, an independent artist may get somewhere between 0.003 and 0.004 dollars per stream, which is a fraction of a penny. The way that those platforms work, for if people don't know, is that when you go on there, if you're on Spotify or Apple or Tidal, whatever, you listen to, even SoundCloud, if you listen to nothing but your favorite local artist all month, and you just play that artist 100 times, the money that you pay, if you pay a subscription fee, does not go to that artist. It goes into a pool, it gets divvied up, and it gets paid out on a pro rata basis to whoever on the platform gets the most streams. And who do you think gets the most streams? It's the biggest artists on the platform. So the artists that are making money on those platforms are Taylor Swift and Drake and everybody that is commanding all those millions and millions of streams every month. It's not the artists you listen to. And there are programs. First of all, there's a lot of resistance to this model. There's been some defensiveness on the part of some platforms that have said we can't change it. It's too onerous. It's an accounting nightmare. I don't know how truthful that is. There are some places that are introducing some changes to it. I don't know that it's going to make a big difference anytime soon. And I think the entire model is broken. When you when you basically allow people to access everything for next to nothing, you're never going to be able to spread that minimal amount of money around to pay everyone fairly. It's never going to work. I don't care how you compute it. So I think the answer is to give them another option to contribute where they can actually compensate the artists they listen to. And that's what we're doing.
I'm sure there are so many artists out there that are just so grateful for the van. Let's talk about how you get the word out. How do artists find you? How do listeners find you? What are you doing for your marketing to get, people to understand what you're doing?
It's admittedly very grassroots. And I had this moment early on where I had to figure out how I wanted to talk about it. And I did what a lot of new businesses do, which is I talked to a few major publicists. I talked to some marketing people, and I thought, I want this to grow on one metric only, which is its credibility with artists and fans. And I want it, if it takes a little longer to do that, fine. But I decided that what the best thing to do was to create a kind of guerrilla campaign and go at it from the ground level and just go after one artist at a time on an invite only basis so that we know we're partnering with acts that take it seriously. They're going to help us and help them help us spread the word out among their community, among listeners. We're doing other things, of course, as well. I'm launching a blog shortly and a newsletter. We have an amazing partnership with KXFM where every week they're doing something called Catch of the Week, where we feed them a track that we love and they give it rotation and a little bit of an on-air shout out, which is amazing. And we're the sponsor for that. I'm working on a video partnership. There are ways that I'm going about trying to spread the word on this, but I'm not in any rush. I want it to be something that grows on its credibility and that truly is a venture that has a lot of soul to it. It's a huge pride point for me that we are 100% independent. I financed this myself because I wanted to keep control of it. I don't answer to anybody. I'm not looking to sell it. It is not a startup. I refuse to use that word, which I just used.
Good to know.
because it's not a profit motive. There were frankly a million other places that I could have put that money that would have been wiser from an investment standpoint. It is something that I'm doing for artists. I want them to reap the benefits of it. So just to go back to the economics for a second, artists get 80% of the net on a transaction. And the only reason that we're taking as much as 20% is that we have to cover costs. It doesn't, unfortunately, it's not free to create and operate a platform like this. But my verbal commitment to them is as soon as we can start recouping those costs, we will better that share because I want to give to them as much as I can. I just have to make the thing sustainable first. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And just, in terms of your credibility, you and I met with our respective shows on KXFM. And right. I've never met anyone with a deeper commitment to the artist than you, that also coincidentally, lucky for them, has an incredible business acumen. So they're really lucky to have someone like you that has started the van, that once they get to know you, they are going to realize that you're not smoking, you're not blowing smoke up anywhere except for helping them do their art and get compensated for it in an age where it's, a lot of moving parts. And you've created, seems like the van is this like hub where they don't have to think about much except for making music and then hopefully sharing the word, like spreading the word about this platform to their other independent, musician friends. I'm wondering if you're going to get acts that are signed. They're going to be like, look, I'd rather just go with this guy just because he's got more principles and, he's like walking the talk and has been.
Well, to be clear, there's some misconception, I think, around what we're aiming to do. We're not acting as a label, and there's nothing exclusive about it whatsoever. It's not a promotion platform or a substitute for a label. I love labels, and I have no intention of competing with labels. I would love for labels to play ball with us and allow us to do this for their artists and still have that money go directly to the artist. And even though they're not getting a piece of it, hopefully what they see is that it's a pool of found money, basically, that is not really existing right now. It's not going to take away from what they're making elsewhere on merch or concert tickets. People are going to obviously continue to do that. if they are candidates for for those items. They're going to want something in return if they're willing to shell out 25 or $50. I frankly think we're tapping something that doesn't exist. And so if you consider it as found money, I would hope that labels would see that as an opportunity to encourage and compensate their artists at a crucial point when they're on their way up, when they need that exposure from another place, fan money. And with that in mind, we have a few dozen labels that are participating, that are giving us their blessing, introducing us to their artists. Some of them are doing all the work for their artists. Some of them are simply stepping aside and say, go with God. And they do get it. And like with any business, I think if we prove it with them, we prove it with the unsigned artists, that we're going to get bigger and bigger acts and labels. It's not really my concern. I'm not about prestige. I would rather just have enough music to be able to refresh the site with every week. And so far we're on track with that. But yeah, I haven't talked to a single artist who's unenthusiastic about it. They see that there's no downside.
None.
And
There's
I think
none.
there's a wonderful artist named Charlotte Baumgartner who we had a terrific conversation with in her car, in her garage with her manager over Zoom for like an hour and a half. She asked amazing questions. And in the end, she was like, there's no reason not to do this. And I'm like, thank you. Like, she gets it. And so it's pretty evident.
I'm curious as to what her questions were in terms of like, what would the downside be?
Yeah. I think some artists think there's fine print that they might be missing, although you'd be surprised. By and large, they're not cynical. They're not skeptical. And they get approached by a lot of, get rich quick kind of schemes that, dazzle them with metrics and interactive charts about how much money they can make. And they're wary of that, understandably. But a lot of them just ask really, really good questions about, what am I signing up for? I've had many that have read the terms and conditions. When's the last time you did that? and they've quoted them to me and said, hey, what does this passage mean about intellectual property? And I'm like, oh, it's a good question. It means that we don't get any of your IP.
Right.
Is there exclusivity? They ask if there are any fees that they're missing, which there are not. They of course all want to know who else is on board. And so we try to assure them that there's not just a high caliber of artists, which is, relative and objective, or subjective rather, but we try to let them know that we have artists from all over the world. And so if you're a Philly band or a Brooklyn band or a Melbourne band or a Leeds band, there are people from your scene that are already on the platform that you probably know. And I've had more than one artist say, oh, you know what? We're joining up because Joe's on it. That's awesome. That's how a community starts.
What you're really doing is offering artists a place to develop their tribe and to send their tribe.
I think if I was going to impart one thing to them, it actually would not be, the necessity of signing up in the van. Of course, I would love to have them, but it would be more about helping yourself, be a part of this change. It's trite and it's cliche, but it's also very, very true with artists complaining about how bad things are. They look at their royalty statements, if they have one. They look at the state of the streaming business and they go, God, things are so screwed. And they sort of throw up their hands. Well, they have a role in it to help change it. And there's a lot they can be doing. We've talked to them about everything from, evangelizing these platforms that are trying to do the right things for them and drive their listeners there, as I say. Also, maybe windowing their music. I see some of the really, really smart ones doing that already, where this is de rigueur in TV and film. You start with a place that earns you the most money, and then downstream, you make it available elsewhere, ending with the place that pays you the least money. That's how the theatrical window has worked for decades, and it's how television's working now as well. I don't know why more musicians aren't doing that. Yeah, and it basically is predicated on the basic concept that the people who want to see it most badly, who are inclined to pay the most amount of money, get to see it first. Mm-hmm. And so with music, I realize there's this big, grave paranoia about poking the bear and not doing anything to tick off those major platforms. But my contention is those platforms really aren't doing much for you in the first place. So why aren't you putting your music out on a platform that pays you the most. I'll give you a perfect example of it. Every year or so, there's an independent artist who has the wisdom and the courage to put their earnings up online. Years ago, it was a cellist named Zoe Keating who famously did it. But there's another guy who did it a couple of years ago. He's not a known entity. And he basically put his music up on every conceivable platform and then made a pie chart of it. And it said, I triggered all the ads on YouTube and I got X amount of money, very little. I charged $7.99 for my album, and I put it up on iTunes, and I got this amount of money. I put it up for streaming on Spotify, and I earned this, et cetera, et cetera. And he put it up on Bandcamp as well. And in the end, he made more money on Bandcamp than he did on all other platforms combined, which Bandcamp's a fairly known entity now. At the time, years ago, they were not nearly as much as they are now. And the results were pretty clear to me that his most ardent fans were finding him on Bandcamp, apparently even without him necessarily driving them there. He also didn't charge any money for his albums on Bandcamp for whatever reason, because he did on iTunes. Anyway, he earned more money on that one platform than on all the others combined. And it seemed to be lost on him that his message to his fans should be, go find me on Bandcamp. He was still sending them to Spotify. I don't know why. And my point isn't that you have to advantage one platform or another, or certainly you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, but you should understand the economics of who is actually paying you and take that seriously and take it into account when you determine your talking points with your fans. Nowadays, I would tell him, you know what? You don't have to shout us out exclusively either. If you're on the van, why don't you tell your listeners, support me on the van, or buy some of my merch on Bandcamp, or go find me on Patreon if I've got some sort of, campaign. Give them the option. But all three of those platforms, in my opinion, are doing you a solid. They're in your corner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fantastic, Kevin. I love it. So how has your life changed now that you've started the band?
It's busier.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I mean, the highlight of this process, there were certainly a lot of lows. Development went on forever, and certainly there's been a lot of setbacks, and there are always a few people that are difficult to get across the line for one reason or another. But the highlight, far and away, has been talking to as many artists I've talked to throughout one of the darkest periods in recent history. I am amazed at how resilient they are, their commitment to what they do. I envy them at a certain level because I never really, started playing music myself. And I've talked to artists from all over the world, Japanese shoegaze bands, Swedish pop bands, British post-punk bands, and East and West Coast indie pop bands. And they just are amazing people. And I look forward to seeing them again on stages. I hope to get a lot of them signed up, but I wish that the average person could have that kind of firsthand communication that I've had with them to understand how hard they work and often how thanklessly. I don't know how they're able to do what they do and make a living. Many of them, of course, have one, if not more than one other job. There's one guy who runs a label out of his tiny apartment that is superb and has tapped into a niche in the culture that has been just amazing for me to discover. And his other job is working as a nurse in a hospital, and he's on the front lines of the pandemic. And it's amazing to me. It's inspiring.
Yeah. So you've really been able to experience these human interest stories throughout your journey of starting the van. Yeah, I worked in indie music for a very, very long time, and it's amazing how much they can juggle and still get on stage and play. And I would love to see the van, sponsoring your own shows and things like that.
So would I.
Doing, yeah.
I have a lasting memory of seeing Keith Morris. Just legend, Circle Jerks, Black Flag, and now has an amazing band called Off, and he is. There's so much about this guy that embodies what is wonderful about music. He's a true lifer, and he's made punk music or music in general his whole life. And I saw him years ago playing with Off, and I want to say it was in the observatory, and he put on this amazing 90-minute show, as fierce and energetic and confrontational as ever. And then I went over to the merch table, and he was doing his own merch.
Yeah.
And then he was doing his own loadout. And I just looked at, and this guy's older than I am. And I look at how hard he's working, and all I can think is, it should be easier for this guy. There should be more of everything for this guy. He shouldn't have to grind as hard as he does to get as little as he does. And the work is its own thing, but there has to be compensation for it. There are a lot of applications for this model. It's occurred to me that it's not necessarily confined to music. There are a lot of artists who I think would love to benefit from some incremental compensation for their creative work, whether it's photographers or playwrights or whomever. I chose music because music is where I live, but it has occurred to me that we could be using this platform as a way to reintroduce people to music that has been lost or held up over rights or in my catalog work at EMI. The most fun that I ever had was tracking things down and finding rights and finding the people that had the rights or had the possession of the masters or whatever. There's a lot of that still out there, and there is a way to maybe use the platform to help them to make a living, help monetize those assets, to use a business term, but most importantly, to get it back out in front of people if it is not available. Even in this age of endless availability, there are a lot of things that are missing from these platforms. And we don't know why. Somebody's got the rights and has held them up or just doesn't even know where to begin. My primary goal right now is to help the artists who are active and maybe struggling or at least just in need of some extra push in what they're doing, because they're out there, they're actively working and trying to make a living from their music, and we're aiming to help them.
Do you have an affiliate program where people that have relationships with independent artists that they can connect with you? Okay, good. Yeah, I want to all of that information. Oh, is it active? Or a third party could say, hey, look, I have a line on all these different kinds of artists. I would like to join up with you and feed you.
It's a little tricky because we're invite only at the moment, and that's, as I say, that's mainly just due to resources. I don't. On the one hand, I don't want to become, a deep repository for all music. I am not in the game of trying to get as much volume as quickly as possible. I really would rather it be measured, and I want artists that are willing to partner with us, that have some momentum already, and they have some of that inertia going for them. That said, I'm happy for them to reach out, and we can tell them honestly if we can take them on. They can contact us at admin1@thevan.wtf. The site is thevan.wtf only because that was easier and available and cheaper than thevan.com.
And perfect. And it just makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Rock and roll.
Did you know you could get that? I've talked to people at the domain hosting that didn't know that they didn't know they offered that.
I love that. Oh my God, I have to steal that one. Okay, so yeah, all the contact information will be available in the comment section. And Kevin, one of the biggest conversations going on right now in the world is following your passion, and you certainly are following your passion. What's it feel like to have gotten to this juncture with the van? Because I remember when it was just an idea. And how's it feel?
It's a mixed bag. I would say it's gratifying to be doing something and to be putting quite literally my money where my mouth is, and actually be trying to follow through on something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. It's also lonely. It's lonely like anything is. It's hard to tell even over the past year and a half. Everybody feels a little lonely, a little isolated. So I don't know where it's the pandemic ending and the entrepreneurship beginning.
True that.
But I think it's lonely also because you don't always feel like things are like factors are on your side. It can feel very oppressive that the world, and especially the creative arts business, in whatever form you look at it, is a money making machine. And there are a lot of people that are in it for very cynical reasons, or not necessarily cynical, but they're primarily or unilaterally focused on money. And it can be hard to find people around you that believe in the same basic concepts that you do. I think we've lost a little bit of appreciation for some of those non-tangible reasons that people make art, and we've certainly undervalued the impact that art has in our lives. We all need it and we all crave it, but yeah. But to get back to your question, I mean, I'm happy to be doing something, and I have no illusions about how much contribution I'm going to ultimately make. If we make a difference in one artist's life, not to be Pollyanna about it, but I will be very gratified. And I've seen the statements that I know we have made a difference in a few, but it's really not. My metric is not about sales or volume or anything. It's just about ethos.
I love it. Kevin, thank you so much again for your time and for your passion. It's heartwarming to know that there are people out there that are, really sticking up and trying to help musicians flourish. It's a great thing.
Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And that's it for today. This is Caroline with Connected Caroline. Make it a giving day. Thanks.